Trainers, welcome back to the LAIC side stream. Myself, Ben Kiriakou here, joined by the wonderful Matt Maynard, and we're here to capture even more of the action here at LAIC. Now, only 2 matches have gone on so far. We're going into round 3, but we have had some absolutely cracking matches so far. Definitely worthy of the mainstream. And we've got another one, Matt, coming up.
Yeah, it is yet another game where you could probably tell me, if you told me on Monday this was finals, I would believe you. The caliber of matches we're getting, even on this side stream, is crazy. Like, these could all be mainstream matches. This is what we were saying earlier. It's so nice to have these matches where people look at the pairings and be like, oh, that'd be a great stream match. And then previously, there's been another slightly better stream match on paper that's gone on. It's so good to be able to feature these because we have got a couple of absolutely monster players on this next round.
Yeah, we're going to be featuring Eduardo Cunha, 2022 World Champion, versus Carson Confer, that most recently won the Sacramento Regional Championship in 2024, so last season, but still in regulation set H, popularizing a fair amount of archetypes across his journey in regulation set H. And yeah, he's someone that definitely we had our eyes on for the World Championships last year as one of our players to watch as well. Eduardo Cunha always on the list of players when he's of players that you definitely want to keep an eye on, and this is the matchup that we're going to be seeing today.
Yeah, 2 teams that are reasonably well established. We've seen these competitions for 6 before. One of them maybe a bit more standard, the other. Eduardo running a team very similar to the team he ran at the Lille Regionals, where he got top 4. Except this time he's got a Dragonite over the Smeagol he was running that time. This is a 6 we've seen very similar to Lele Briganti's 6, but the Ninetales, Eduardo has decided, is not worth that slot. Dragonite being the Pokemon of choice, and that may be a wise decision into the number of fire types that Carson Confer is running.
Yeah, right. This is a team that's been picking up popularity. It's there to go fast and hit really, really hard. You've got the Charcoal Torp with the Eruption and the Charcoal, the Sun, the Typhlosion setting up the Eruption. You've got this offensive support, Annihilate, to keep things running. But hey, if you want to go fast, you've got Lilligant with the After You, the Sleep Powder, the Close Combat, and the Solar Blade with its Terra Ghost, so hard to stop doing. And if it wants to go slow, Incineroar Farigiraf is a really nice way of getting that Trick Room set up.
Yeah, a lot of mixed modes on this team. You can go fast with the Scarf Typhlosion. You've got Helping Hand Torkoal, so you can fire off a Helping Hand boosted, Sun boosted, Terra Fire boosted Eruption on turn 1 if you really desperately want to. And like you said, we've got the Incineroar. This is probably built more offensively with that Clear Amulet blocking opposing Intimidates from Eduardo, again benefiting from the Sun. Farigiraf blocking any incoming priority moves, most notably the 2 Fake Outs on Eduardo's team, making that Trick Room setup a lot safer. And Lilligant, to round it all out, you've got a very, very strong, very, very fast attacker. You've got the After You option as well for Torkoal's Eruption. Or, if you feel like doing a bit of gambling, you have got Sleep Powder as well, that accursed move.
I think it's like, with a team that's that offensive, it can often be quite difficult to play up against unless you have a lot of great defensive tools. Incineroar obviously does pretty well against everything not named Annihilate, maybe not named Lilligant overall. You've got the Dragonite with its multi-scale. That can stand in front of all of these fire-type threats, but cannot stand up against Final Gambit, not even with its multi-scale ability. Then you've got the Assault Vest Rillaboom. That can go Terra Fire. The Ursaluna is trained to be really quite defensive, and if that's not enough, then the Golden Goat is Terra Water. And so there's a lot of options that Eduardo has at their disposal to survive the onslaught that Carson is going to be trying to maintain across this battle.
I think it's worth noting as well that Carson's team, there are no Dragon resists on that team and no Terra types that resist Dragon. So with that multi-scale, allowing it to always take 1 hit that isn't a Final Gambit from Annihilate, that Dragonite could be very threatening, and we do see the Dragonite lead from Eduardo.
With the Ursaluna as well, the Farigiraf Incineroar a great lead to be getting into Trick Room. There's not a lot that Eduardo can do about the Trick Room going up. I think the key here is what is Eduardo going to do about the Trick Room going up itself? Like, while you're in that condition, how do you slow down these Trick Room attackers successfully enough to be able to get out the other side of Trick Room, and then you get your opportunity to play offensively?
Yeah, well, I wonder if we'll see Eduardo leveraging the Yawn on Ursaluna potentially. Not going to be able to leverage anything with Ursaluna this turn, eating a fake out from Carson's Incineroar. But one of the things you can do against Trick Room in the early turns is just slow it down. Get some Yawns out, force people to switch around so they don't get any momentum going. We see 2 critical hits in 5 hits from Dragonite's Scale Shot there.
Pretty good.
Eduardo's going to appreciate that from his Dragonite, getting a bit of extra damage down the Incineroar. The Ursaluna flinches, and as we expect, the Trick Room does go up from Carson's Farigiraf.
And this Farigiraf, let's not forget, is a Throat Spray variant, so after a Hyper Voice, it's going to be doing quite a lot of damage. Now, Incineroar on Carson's team is also trained to be that little bit more offensive. With close combat, it would probably be able to pick up a knockout after a Hyper Voice, or maybe get close to knocking out this Ursaluna, depending on just how bulky that Eduardo has trained it. But this is what Eduardo's game plan is, trying to leverage everything at their disposal to get all the way through Trick Room. That's why the Dragonite switching out into the Incineroar, getting an Intimidate not onto the Incineroar, but in fact onto the Farigiraf.
Do you see that close combat coming out from Incineroar, a move that's been picking up popularity on these Trick Room teams, but Ursaluna is so bulky that it manages to take the double up of the close combat and the Hyper Voice from the Farigiraf. And it looks like it is going to be able to fire off a Yawn this turn into the Farigiraf, now giving Carson the choice of either you switch out and you lose that special attack boost on your Farigiraf, or you stay in and you go to sleep.
There's a fun interaction here as well, where the Incineroar is just switched in, it's got Fake Out active, and if Farigiraf stays in, the Armor Tail blocks a Fake Out. But if the Farigiraf switches out so that it doesn't go to sleep at the end of this turn, then Fake Out is active. That Ursaluna might even be able to weave in another attack.
That's a very interesting observation. I think Eduardo is going to be happy to maybe say, okay, well, if you stay with Farigiraf, you lose so much momentum from that, but I'm happy to take that. Because there's a Golden Go in the back, potentially set up with a nasty plot if you get a few extra turns. But Farigiraf does stay in, calling potentially a fake out. Close combat coming out into the Incineroar. That's going to go down. Looks like a double KO this turn for Carson.
This is such a cool play by Carson. Just saying, well, okay, my Farigiraf's going to fall asleep at the end of this turn, but actually, I'm going to get 2 knockouts. And if you go for a fake out, you're not going to be doing anything. I've got the overall speed advantage with the Trick Room, and there's the second Hyper Voice going down into the Ursaluna, picking up that KO. Now Farigiraf goes to sleep. It's got 1 guaranteed turn of sleep, but actually Farigiraf at full health, pretty happy to be sitting asleep on the board. It's not going to be too worried about that whatsoever.
The big worry here, though, is this Terra Water Golden Go on Eduardo's side, because he has stalled out a few turns of Carson's Trick Room now. If this Golden Go can get a nasty plot up, for example, once Trick Room's down, this could be very threatening, obviously depending on what Carson has got in the back. If there is that Typhlosion in the back, then that's still going to be pretty scary. But if Dragonite can get a Scale Shot off, for example, 2 Scale Shots, maybe get a Tailwind up once Trick Room's down, this Golden Go can absolutely still bring this game back.
Well, the Terra Water is going to be the first stage of that. There's knockoff into the Dragonite, so loaded dice goes. That's a real detriment to Eduardo's damage potential with the Dragonite. The Farigiraf takes its mandatory turn of sleep, and here is the start for Eduardo of the comeback. Only a few more turns of Trick Room left. You've got to make sure that Farigiraf has taken enough damage so that once Trick Room expires, you're going to be able to easily pick up the knockout there and make it rain. But with only 3 hits on the Scale Shot, it isn't enough to pick up the KO onto this Farigiraf, who remains on the board. That might actually be an advantage for Eduardo. Now, 2 Pokemon for Carson cannot come in to replace the Farigiraf and Incineroar. Instead, only Incineroar gets replaced with one of the Pokemon that Carson has kept in the back.
Yeah, Carson instead deciding, I don't want to get the nasty plot up in case there is that fast back end, maybe the Typhlosion or the Lilligant. instead opting just to get KOs immediately if possible. And if Dragonite can get another scale shot off here, once Trick Room goes down, it will most likely be faster than everything else on Carson's team. Again, with the exception of potentially a Lilligant that could be lurking around in the back here.
Especially if it's, Torkoal, the third Pokemon of choice for Carson. No surprises there whatsoever. But with this Golden Go already taking a special attack drop, it's going to have to spend some time getting some nasty plots going before it's going to be able to pick up a KO on that Golden Go.
Yeah, you're in a strange situation here for Edu, where you need the Friggraff to stay asleep, but also you kind of want the Torkoal to not faint here.
Yeah.
We do see Carson staying in with both Terra Fire coming out of the Torkoal, this Eruption with the Charcoal boost, going to do a lot of damage. Not quite as much as maybe a Specs boosted one does. And no Protect on the Dragonite. Is this going to be enough to pick up the KO?
Terra Fire it certainly could be, but no, Dragonite holding on. Friggraff staying asleep. These are all of the things that Eduardo needed to go in their favour. There's the nasty plot. Golden Go going from -1 now up to +1. It's got that Life Orb as well. Here's the Scale Shot going into a Torkoal. With a few hits, this could put it into range of a 1+ Make It Rain. There's a critical hit, 3 hits so far. 4 going in. This Dragonite has forgotten that it's dropped its loaded dice. It's going for 5 hits, most of which getting critical hits. Wow. This Dragonite's really got some words to say to Carson right now as the Twisted Dimensions return to normal.
Who needs loaded dice? And again, we see now Eduardo looks like he's going to lock in that Tailwind again, covering for the Lilligant in the back end. Because even with 2 Scale Shot boosts, if the sun is up, Lilligant is most likely going to be faster than this Dragonite. But with Tailwind, this Dragonite is now going to outspeed the Lilligant and can one-hit KO it through the Focus Sash if it gets enough hits of Scale Shot. So this, again, may be what it comes down to. Does the Dragonite remember next turn that it doesn't have a loaded dice anymore?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Make It Rain going into the Friggraff is going to pick up the knockout. If the Lilligant is in the back, a Scale Shot is going to have to pick up the KO here, because after a Tailwind, the Golden Go is still slower than a Sun speed boosted Lilligant, and there it is coming out in the back. So yeah, that knockoff really could be so influential on this turn as to how this game resolves. Both of these trainers in a great spot to be able to take it, but only one will have the opportunity.
You can't even really go for a Protect player in the Golden Go here either if you're Eduardo, because the Torkoal, even if you get the Lilligant, will just KO your Dragonite. And so you end up in the same position regardless, I think. You just need to pick up the Lilligant this turn. I can't see a play that isn't just attacking with both. Because Lilligant can just take after your Eruption here and get double KO immediately.
Well, let's see, because the Dragonite is going for the Protect here, so maybe there is an option that Eduardo spotted. The Solar Blade going into, or charging up in the sun. It's a charge move. It's only going to take 1 turn to get it done, and it is going to be going down into the Golden Go. So Golden Go's not going to be attacking this time round, and now I think Eduardo is significantly on the back foot. I think Eduardo's making a read in that spot that the Solar Blade was going to go down into the Dragonite. Knowing that the Lilligant could maybe hang on if a Scale Shot was avoided, but here's the Scale Shot, so we get to see if the Scale Shot is enough to pick up the KO.
Well, 2 is definitely not. I think 5 might have been. I guess maybe Eduardo fancied his odds of Carson aiming at the Dragonite higher than he fancied his odds of hitting 5 Scale Shots without a loaded dice.
Right. I think that's probably it. You've got to go for every opportunity, and it's quite tough in these spots, especially when you're playing against a good player. You know that they're not going to make too many mistakes, but it can happen. You know, it can happen. And yeah, what's the chances of Carson making a mistake in that spot and not going after the Golden Go? Pretty slim.
Yeah.
I guess hitting 5 times. I don't know, maybe hitting 5 times is more likely. Who knows? But
it might be. I think if I'm in that position, I'm probably clicking the Scale Shot button, because I don't think Carson's going to make a mistake in that situation. But again, like you said, sometimes the play you've got to make is hope that your opponent doesn't make the winning play, right?
It can look unintuitive. It can look unintuitive, but if there is a way, and that was a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Ed could
You play to and out. If there's a chance, take a chance, right? And even at this top level, we've seen it before when people have, in finals, players you'd never expect to make mistakes have made somewhat silly errors here and there, and it happens, right? People make mistakes, and sometimes that is your win condition. Sometimes your opponent doesn't see the line. I've seen people in situations, I've been in situations where I've thought, okay, well, if my opponent just does this turn, and then in the next turn does this, then the turn after that does this, and then does this and this, then I always lose. But maybe your opponent doesn't see those 5 steps that they need to hit.
Yeah. And there is a lot of steps to go down. We're going to be getting into game 2 here. We've got the same leads. Ed has switched things up a little bit because the Ursaluna was definitely on the other side last time round. Not that that makes any competitive difference whatsoever, but Farigiraf and Incineroar are going to lead things off the castle.
It's just staring down the Farigiraf now. It's more of an intimidation tactic. Incineroar is one with the intimidate ability, but Ursaluna looks pretty intimidating to me.
Definitely always a risk when you've got an opposing Ursaluna on the field that you're going to be taking a big attack regardless of what the form is. That's why the fake out goes into the Ursaluna scale shot, following up onto the Farigiraf. And he's before any knockoffs, so the loaded dice is still in play here, going to hit a minimum of 4 times, and looks like it's going to be stopping at 4 times this time round. Dragonite going to get its speed boosted, defense drop, and the Trick Room going to be going up. So pretty similar to what we saw in the last game, except this time the Farigiraf is the one that's taken a little bit of a chunk out of it.
Like I said, very, very similar to last time. But we saw last time that the double up of Close Combat and Hyper Voice is not enough to pick up this Ursaluna, but its HP was low enough last time, and I think the combination of Close Combat and Psychic will be enough. And I think both players will also be very aware of that. And it looks like Eduardo might be looking to play around that this turn.
Switching out the Dragonite, now being able to switch in the Incineroar. The Intimidate not going to go onto that Clear Amulet. Incineroar on Carson's side. This is why Clear Amulet has picked up so much in popularity on Incineroar in these more dedicated Trick Room teams, just to make sure that you're always putting out the offensive pressure that you need to. Cycling Incineroars and Rillabooms in really does slow down a lot of Trick Room teams, so it's a way of not being slowed down whatsoever. Now the Incineroar gets its safety goggles knocked off. It's not going to be any factor in this game whatsoever. Hyper Voice goes down. Farigiraf gets its Throat Spray boost, but I've got a suspicion that it's not going to have that Throat Spray boost for very long, because there's the Blood Moon knocking out the Farigiraf.
That is a big K on the Farigiraf this turn, especially with Incineroar just hitting the field. That now opens up the opportunity for Eduardo to start clicking Fake Out and just stalling more turns of this Trick Room. And notably, a lot of the Pokemon on Carson's side do not have access to the move Protect. Torkoal does here, but Incineroar on Carson's side does not, which means that if you fake out the Torkoal here, for example, you do have a pretty safe Yawn that you can fire off into Carson's Incineroar. And that will allow you to stall even more turns of this Trick Room. Because a lot of time with Trick Room teams, it's getting through the first Trick Room is the tricky bit. Obviously, there's the Lilligant in the back still, so there is still a fast option available, but if you can get through this Trick Room and position yourself so the Lilligant's less threatening, then suddenly this becomes a much more winnable game.
That's going to be the thing for Eduardo this week as well, because there is the option for a helping hand on the Torkoal. We're in Sun. The Flare Blitz, the Incinerate, has not been able to be effective onto Carson's Incineroar. Here's the Flare Blitz, Sun boosted, helping hand boosted enough to pick up the KO onto this Ursaluna. That's a huge knockout, especially since the Earth Power was the move of choice that Eduardo locked in to try and pick up a KO onto Incineroar there. And this is quickly turning into a very difficult game for Eduardo. I feel like the Ursaluna was a key part of the game plan, both getting through but also putting some pressure onto those Trick Room environments, and now that it's taken the terrestrialization, Golden Go in the back that we know was there, which was pretty crucial for the end game last time, is not going to be able to terrestrialize away from its fire type weakness.
Absolutely, that Golden Go is now in a much more vulnerable position. It's a lot better into the Lilligant if it's in its original Steel and Ghost typing, but the problem is the 2 fire types next to the Lilligant now, and Lilligant having access to After You means that you can't even just say, okay, I outspeed the Torkoal now, I'll KO it before it moves, because it could just move first anyway. Speaking of Torkoal, we are going to see a Terrifier come out. Now it's threatening big damage with that Eruption. It's taking a tiny bit of fake out chip damage, but not enough to really weaken this Eruption in any meaningful way. And here comes the big damage from Torkoal.
That is a big Eruption coming out. Enough to pick up the KO onto this Incineroar. No questions asked. The multi-scale helping the Dragon just hang on with that little bit of HP. There's a knockoff. Knocking off the loaded dice again, Dragonite being able to hang on, so multi-scale just saving it from being knocked out this turn. It's not intimidated, so all of those scale shots will be hitting at their full power. Just unfortunately for this Dragonite, unfortunately for Eduardo, not as many times as he would have liked.
And this game's looking pretty wrapped up here, because with Trick Room down, with Trick Room up, Torkoal is always faster than both these Pokemon, both of them in range of an Eruption. With Trick Room gone, as soon as Lilligant comes in, now after your Eruption is the threat. And Dragonite doesn't really have an opportunity here to try and get any kind of speed advantage, so maybe you just have to keep protecting both your Pokemon and hope that you get through all the turns of Sun. But that's not a particularly likely win condition.
Not at all, but when there's a win con, there's a way. Golden Go protecting itself on this turn, Dragonite protecting itself. So here's the double protect, here's the Lilligant switch in. Now we've got the Trick Room reversing at the end of this turn or next turn, doesn't really matter. The Eruption is just going to be happening over and over again, as you said. And there's still, what, 2 turns of Sun remaining?
2 turns, I believe, yeah, so you would need a lot of protects. I think that was still a very heads-up play from Eduardo, because, again, you can play for your opponent making a mistake, and if Carson doesn't switch the Incineroar out there, that double protect suddenly puts you in a good position where you have speed advantage. But, obviously, Carson, a very seasoned player, knows what he's doing with his team. I'm imagining this is just going to be a simple after your Eruption. Here it comes. And Dragonite is going to go down this turn. Golden Go will survive, but the problem with that is that Lilligant, even without the Sun up, is going to be faster than this Golden Go. So there's just always the option, no matter how many protects you get in a row now, of this after your Eruption. Looks like this is going to be wrapped up in Carson's favour.
Yeah, this is a great example of just Carson using all of the tools at their disposal against these really dedicated Trick Room teams. It's so difficult to be able to hold your own if you don't have a dedicated plan and execute it absolutely perfectly. And all of those little things that Carson had at their disposal made them the winner over Eduardo Cunha in round 3 here at LAIC.
Yeah, it's a tricky matchup because this team is not as much of a dedicated Trick Room team as we've seen, for example, with the team that Brian Collins popularized, the one where the Typhlosion is instead Indeedee, there's a Hatterene, I think, on there instead of the Annihilate.
Yeah.
Which is a lot more committed to click and follow me, getting that Trick Room up, lots of priority blocking with the Psychic Terrain, with the Frigoraph, and its Armor 10 routine. This one, though, you have to be a lot more respectful of things like Typhlosion or Annihilate on lead. So against the dedicated Trick Room teams, a lot of the time you can lead Golden Go and try and get some nasty plots up. But in this situation, if there's, for example, a Typhlosion or an Annihilate, suddenly that Golden Go is looking a lot less enticing. So you have to be so much more careful with that on lead. And again, in the situation where Trick Room's gone down, you've still got that fast mode once the Trick Room's over to try and capitalize on that endgame, as we saw in both games with that Lilligant.
You don't always see that with these more dedicated Trick Room teams that always lines itself up. I think it takes a good player piloting that sort of composition to make sure that it's like they don't lose enough resources such that the Lilligant has to come in Sun and Trick Room and then can get knocked out before the end of the Trick Room environment as well. So it does take quite a lot of foresight for players like Carson that are running this sort of composition to be like, hey, I just need to make sure that I'm picking up the KOs as and where, because if you think about that sort of mid-game where the Helping Hand and Flare Blitz came out into the Ursaluna to knock it out after Ursaluna had committed its Terastallization, you see this the other way around. It's like, well, the Fake Out comes into the Incineroar that turn. Helping Hand, nothing still does nothing to
Glitch is almost twice as hard. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's doing nothing really, really well. And so you've got to make those calls in the moment, and you can get that wrong quite easily unless you're an experienced player that's played these matchups quite a lot. You have that suspicion, the expectation of what's kind of going on. But then what techs like Helping Hand are all about, also running an offensive Incineroar, give you those options in Trick Room to find a way to make sure that you end Trick Room in the right position.
I think it's interesting the thing you mentioned there about knowing what's like, having like gut feelings about what's going to happen, because on the surface it does look like that turns a little bit of a 50-50 in terms of where the fake out's going, but Carson will have played this matchup a lot, I imagine, or have been in situations like this a lot where there's a fake out active on the board in front of this. And he'll know that the majority of the time, for example, in these situations, his opponent will fake out the Torkoal, just from anecdotal experience. So he will then know, okay, most of the time I can get away with this play. Yes, there is a chance it goes wrong, but more likely than not, they will fake out the Torkoal because that's what most people do in that situation.
And it's the most dangerous Pokemon. If you don't knock out the Torkoal in that spot, it's picking up 2 KOs. It's not holding back.
Exactly.
So, how much of a risk are you willing to take if you're playing against that sort of composition? Sometimes it's like, well, kind of have to do it. And if my opponent makes that read, well, fair play. Fair play.
Yeah, exactly.
But the risk is not necessarily worth it for Eduardo in that spot. So tough matchup to play for both players. Both players are on the knife edge. Carson came out on top this time, but you played that game 100 times, you'll have 100 different matches.
Yeah, exactly. I think game 2, obviously they had that call in the mid game, but Carson played game 1, I think, exceptionally well, just not allowing Eduardo to ever really get a foothold in the game. Even stuff like leaving the Frigoraph in to guarantee that the fake out doesn't go off, even though you know it's going to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And as you said, the positioning of the Lilligant in the end game, there was only one turn in that entire set where Eduardo was even able to attack the Lilligant. And he would have needed a scale shot without loaded dice to connect and hit 5 times, and even then, I'm not 100% sure that would have picked it up. So like you said, it's a lot of experience in terms of how to position these Pokemon. As we pointed out, there's not a huge amount of protects on Carson's team. It's only really Torkoal and Frigoraph.
Yeah, which it means that you're attacking, doesn't it?
It does mean you're attacking.
It means you have to get into that Trick Room environment early. You have to need to make sure that you have the speed control that you want, and then after that, well, you have to make sure you're targeting the right slots, because if you're not, you're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah, exactly. You have to make sure that you're not also getting the Pokemon you want outside of Trick Room in too early because your Pokemon got KO'd.